Welcome to the Best Team Wins podcast with Adam Robinson. He's talking to today's industry leaders and entrepreneurs about the people side of their business.
Welcome to the Best Team Wins podcast, where we feature entrepreneurs and business leaders whose exceptional approach to the people side of their business has led to incredible results. My name is Adam Robinson, and for the next 25 minutes, I'll be your host as we explore how to build your business through better hiring. Today on the program, Jeff Ellman is a founder of several companies, including his current company, UrbanBound, based out of Chicago, as well as companies such as Humatal, HomeScout, Hireology, and others. Jeff is a seasoned sales leader and entrepreneur. He's hired thousands of employees. He's raised millions in VC funding, is worldly and has seen it all. And Jeff, we are excited to have you on the program today.
Thanks, Adam. I'm thrilled to be here.
So we are going to be sharing real life experiences over the course of your business building career. But before we dive in, let's set the stage for our listeners. Give us 30 seconds on UrbanBound and what you guys are up to.
Sure. So we started UrbanBound about 6.5 years ago. And what we found was that in corporate America, there's a big problem. And the problem is that most companies, when it comes to hiring talent, typically they have to go outside their backyard with the unemployment rate right now being around 4.5%, and they have to relocate employees. The way relocation usually works is, Adam, here's $10,000 for your move. Good luck. We'll see you on your start date, or go figure out your move on your own, and we're going to reimburse you for some of the costs along the way. Our goal is to provide a better experience for employees by building software that allows a company to create a policy that really is the guidelines for the entire move through the software that points the employee to the best suppliers to use to help them learn more about their city, and to overall have a proven process to follow to ensure that the relocation goes well. So we really factor in on how do we improve the best possible onboarding experience at any company in this country and in this world.
Wow. All right. If listeners want to learn more, what's the best way for them to do that?
By visiting urbanbound.com.
All right. So let's jump right in. Jeff, you've done how many companies at this point?
6 companies.
6. You and I, along with Michael Krasman, partnered to launch Hireology going on 8 years ago now, which is hard to believe. But let's talk about UrbanBound in the origin of that business from a people standpoint. You guys had been, I know, working on that for a while under the name Think Chicago before embarking on scaling that business. So take us to the moment you knew that you needed to staff it differently to add different people to the organization and grow it. Just take us through that thought process and how you approach that.
Yeah, I'll just take you back to actually the Think Chicago days, which was for any entrepreneur who's looking to start a business, really starting with the MVP, so the minimal viable product. And for us, it was, how can we get in front of as many HR leaders as possible, see if there really is a problem out there that people are willing to pay money to solve. So the idea of UrbanBound really went back to Think Chicago, which was, we realized that most companies, when they were relocating employees, they really weren't providing a great experience, and there was very little support. And yet the city of Chicago was doing everything they can to attract companies to be headquartered here. But those companies that were in Chicago were doing nothing to really get employees to be excited to want to move here. So we partnered with the city. This goes back 7.5 years ago with Mayor Daley, and we had CD-ROMs that went out to HR departments from the sent to employees, really to focus on workforce attraction and workforce retention. And then we quickly learned there was a big problem that we were solving just in Chicago, and we had to scale this to other markets. So we got rid of the name Think Chicago and launched UrbanBound, and then really learned that if we can actually write policies and guidelines for companies and control the expenses on behalf of the employer, we can move those funds in the right direction to the right suppliers and report back on performance to ensure that relocations are going well. And as we were scaling the company, getting back to your question around hiring and the right people, it was all early on. The early days was about specialization of job functions. So we knew we wanted to scale, and we wanted to scale quickly. And we felt the best way to do that was specifically we had to get customers. So out of the gate, we wanted to bring on the lighthouse accounts. If you think about the PwCs or the C.H. Robinsons, the PepsiCos, the Fortune 500 companies in the world, we wanted them as customers. So we targeted them. We had a different pricing, call it, if you want to call it free or very low price, to get them in the door, knowing that we could have some case studies to help us scale. And then we hired people for specific roles. So whether it was a BDM, which was a business development manager who was responsible for getting meetings, or an AE who was responsible for closing those meetings, and then of course account managers who were responsible for the renew and upsell of those accounts at that point in time. So very specialized hiring.
What did that early team look like?
It was a team of people who really had no experience in relocation, because I myself had no experience in relocation. But it was a team of people that were all wanting to solve this problem that everyone could relate to, which was moving is not a great experience and there could be a better way. And software should really be the way to do that. But these are people that were really eager to learn and excited to teach and wanted to offer something new to a market that had never seen relocation software before.
And your approach to finding those individuals comprised of what when you were getting started?
So luckily for me, and when I told my investors when we first started the company, is that my prior life, I was a recruiter. I started a recruiting company and had a very large database of talented salespeople in the Chicago area. So I was able to go through a list and identify the top 20 people who I call like social kingpins who are very successful in their selling career. And I asked each one of them to make 3 introductions for me, and I gave them the template. And from there, word really spread that there was a high growth company in the relocation space in Chicago in HR tech that was looking to scale their sales team. And we had a plethora of candidates that were great.
So let's talk about that recruiting company, Humatal. So you have the benefit not only of having hired lots of people for your own businesses, but having done it on behalf of lots of other companies. What have you observed in your time doing this that is the number one, or 2 reasons why companies aren't very good at the hiring part?
I was always surprised when I would send over candidates who I felt were phenomenal for the job, and the employer would reject him or her for reasons that I would never have been able to predict. And it really went back to that they didn't have a hiring process that was allowing them to ask the right questions. And even when they asked the right questions, to even know what answers to look for, that would predict success. So I found that most of my clients, the people who were making hiring decisions back in the day, weren't even trained on how to run a hiring process, weren't trained on the right questions to ask, and really were hiring with their gut almost 100% of the time. So it came down to heads or tails. It was a coin flip to see who they would hire. And the majority of the time, they were making bad hiring decisions, which was costing their company a tremendous amount of time and money and resources.
So what's the first thing you would typically do with an organization that was going from no process to some kind of structured hiring process?
So one of the things that I've done is I've done an exercise with a job function. So people who are in that role, really understanding, who do you want to be in this role? So what words would best describe a salesperson at your company? So we want them to be curious. We want them to be aggressive. We want them to be persistent. And then what are the things that we need to do to try to find those people? And really identifying what are the questions to ask that would unlock, is that characteristic exist in this employee or candidate? And if we're not asking the right questions, really factoring in what are the top 10 or 15 things that we want to get out of an interview. And also, what are the things that we can look for in an interview that ties back to our core values as an employer? Because at the end of the day, if they don't align with your core values and they say all the right things to every single question, they're still not going to be a fit.
Is there a particular interview question you find most valuable as you try to figure this out?
There's not one specific question, but one of my favorite questions that I typically ask is, Adam, if you could share with me at your previous place of employment, what was your boss's name? How do you spell his or her name? When I call your boss and I ask about your performance on a scale of 1 to 10, what is he or she going to tell me? What are they going to say they need to improve upon, et cetera? And you can really dive deep just in that one question. And I think that question is like truth serum, because they really do start to visualize in their mind that you are going to call my boss, you are going to learn these things, and they really tell you everything you need to know from that one question.
What's the range of responses you typically get when you ask? I mean, that's a pretty full frontal question in an interview.
Before the response ever comes out of the candidate's mouth, you start to see the nonverbals. You see the wiggling in the chair, being uncomfortable, the red blotches on the neck, because they're going to have to give me some information they know I'm going to verify. Versus the rest of the interview, some candidates can say things that you probably can't fact check. So it's just a fantastic way to early on to get to really the root of a candidate.
Let's get to back to UrbanBound. How many employees are in the business today, just to give our listeners some ideas to the scale?
We have 35 employees as of today.
So what is the leadership team that you have in place that are required to operate the business at that level?
So our leadership team, I always say that a leadership team should never be able to, if you're having a meeting, a large pizza should be able to service your entire leadership team. So if a large pizza is not going to be enough, then there's a problem. So we've got six people on our team, potentially maybe a seventh as we grow. But you have a director of finance, you have your head of engineering, your head of your product, your COO, and then your two co-founders and your head of sales as well.
And as you evolve the business, what is the biggest challenge or obstacle you're facing as it pertains to the leadership team, communication, and growing the business? What's that one thing on your plate you're working through?
So it always comes back to, as a software company, we win or we lose with our product. So any kind of conversation around the product direction and the roadmap would probably be the answer to that.
Has your approach as a team to diagnosing product-related questions changed as you've gained experience?
It has. It's changed because the more and more customers we bring on, the more problems we can hear in the market, and the more call it advisors that we're able to reach out to before we actually build something. So over time, our product market fit is just spot on versus the early days of the company. We had an hypothesis and we would build something and test it and realize that we were far off. But right now we are absolutely in the right direction, and which is why we're going to be raising more money and adding more fuel to the fire so we can scale this company at a faster pace.
Yeah, excellent. All right, congratulations on that. So as you look forward then, to be a leader in your organization, what do you think is the most important quality to have in the way you do business?
So for me personally, I feel like my passion for the business has to be contagious. I have to have empathy. I have to understand each employee's challenges in their role and be the person who can help remove the roadblocks. I always pride myself on being approachable. And I also think a great leader has to be very curious to understand the ways that they can impact the business and help. And even by curious, I mean, reading blogs, reading books, attending seminars, and gaining that knowledge and sharing that knowledge with your coworkers.
How are you digging that stuff up in interviews? What tips do you have for folks listening based on your experience?
Well, we have specific questions about that. So I do want to know in the interview process, tell me things that you're passionate about. Because if they don't have a passion in their personal life, then they're certainly not going to be excited and passionate about my business. And then when trying to figure out if someone's curious or not, Adam, I'm going to ask them at the end of the interview, what questions do you have for me? And a great candidate, 100 out of 100 times, is going to have 5, 10, 15, 20 questions. And these are not questions around what's your vacation policy like or what are the benefits like. These are questions like, tell me more about the biggest challenge you have in your business and how long is your sales cycle and what's the average retention rate of your customers. Really thoughtful questions that shows me this is a curious person and they're intelligent as well.
You mentioned some things that are important to you personally. How does that translate into the core value system of UrbanBound? Do you have core values? And if so, what are some things that you can share with us about the role of values in the interviewing process?
Yeah, so for any of the companies I started, if I think back to the very first days of starting the company and coming up with a blueprint for what would hopefully be a successful business, it went back to the core values. And what's interesting is that the businesses I started, the core values have been different at some of them. Some have carried through, but here we always talk about being eager to learn and excited to teach, because there's no blueprint out there for how to build relocation management software. No one's ever done it before. As a startup, we talk about doing more faster. So that's one of our core values is, can we do more faster in a short period of time? Can we accomplish goals that we set up for the whole year, maybe in the first 6 months of the year? We always talk about figuring it out as a core value. So once again, when I give someone a problem, I want them to come back to me with a potential solution and try to figure it out on their own before relying on me to give the answer. And then also another important core value for us is being able to see the big picture and understanding the why behind what we do every single day. Because at the end of the day, what really is exciting about our business is how many people we actually helped relocate. And when you can see, we have a flat screen TV in our office where you can see today we moved Jenny Smith, and Jenny Smith is working for PepsiCo, and she's moving to New York with her 2 kids and a dog. That's really rewarding to see the impact we're making on this employee who's going through a difficult life transition, and the fact that we made it easier and a successful process is very rewarding to everyone.
So Jeff, let's transition to more of the tactics of pay and rewards. What's your philosophy around compensation at your company? And how do you approach what you pay employees?
So when it comes to our compensation philosophy, first of all, we always want to make sure we're offering a competitive base because we know that we need to attract and retain the best possible talent. And then with any position at any of my companies, there's always has to be tremendous upside, whether that's ownership in the company, whether that's really aggressive bonuses or commissions. When the company wins, I want to make sure that all of our employees are winning at the same time.
So what do the weightings look like there? I know, from our experience, Chicago is a give me base salary, not necessarily a lot of equity town. If I'm on the West Coast, it's, base is somewhat important, but equity is the most important thing. How does that sit with UrbanBound's model?
Yeah, so very rarely, even when we make an offer to someone in Chicago, when they're negotiating the salary, do they negotiate anything around options in the company? It's typically around base pay, but we do feel strongly that as the company grows, we know that the options are worth more. We want our employees to be tied into the future success of the company. So we train people. We do options 101 right out of the gate to make sure everyone understands what it means to be an owner. Because we do find that in many companies, the reason why employees don't value options is they don't know what it means. So having that as part of the hiring process has been helpful.
Yeah, that's great. What things do you do that's non-monetary comp wise to help people feel like they're getting more of a total reward for being with UrbanBound?
So a lot of the things that we do are around like career growth. So yes, it's not measured in your paycheck, but there are so many opportunities here, whether it's to be on different committees where we have our culture club helping plan events. We're constantly doing things with nonprofits or for charities or giving back to the community. And these are all the things that really make people feel like it's part of this like family environment that makes us have a high retention rate of our employees. And then also really challenging employees to even create some of their own career paths here, because the career path at a company that goes from 10 employees to 30 employees to 100 employees is typically not well defined. And so when people see the opportunity to be promoted and go into different roles, it really creates a lot of excitement and buzz in the company.
Let's take the flip side of the coin then. How do you approach feedback? If things aren't going as well as they should with an individual or someone's struggling for whatever reason, how do you approach that, individually and just philosophically?
So my approach to feedback, first of all, there's two different ways that we approach it. Number one is we do anonymous surveys, leveraging software called Tiny Pulse, where we can collect on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you at work, for example, and we can actually quantify, the types of employees that are here and are they happy, are they not, are they being challenged, et cetera. But I personally love to give it to someone straight between the eyes as to how they're performing. So you always know where you stand with me. If you're not hitting your goals and if you're not hitting the effort-related goals, you're very likely to be put on a performance improvement plan and being given a time frame or warning to turn things around. And if that doesn't happen, that person's dismissed from the company. Either they fire themselves or we fire them. Because at the end of the day, what I promise to every employee that works at any of my companies is that when you look to your left, you look to your right, you're only surrounded by A players. And if there's not an A player next to you, there's a good chance that person won't be there for too long. That's my promise to them.
So what does that conversation look like with someone? Just give our listeners a sense for how that's sounds or is delivered. Let's say you and I have had a verbal conversation about my particular, let's say, sales numbers, and you need me to be at a higher level. We've operated for another couple of weeks. You just haven't seen it. What does that conversation sound like?
Yeah, so those fierce conversations always start off the same way. I would bring you into my room privately, and I'd let you know we're about to have a difficult conversation. And I would start off by asking you 3 or 4 questions. And before I ask you those questions, my philosophy, and my employees know this, is that I truly believe that success is a choice. And every day when you come to work, you have the choice to either be successful or not be successful. So I will ask some open-ended questions. Do you feel that you're putting your best foot forward when you come into work every day? And can you give me examples of that? If you were in my shoes, how do you think I should feel about your performance and why? But having the conversation by asking questions first, then really going into what my expectations are to make sure that we're aligned, and then giving that person the opportunity to quickly turn it around. The majority of the time, you'll see employees cannot turn it around, but those that do, they usually take off and really do great in their career here.
That's great. It's how often, you say in percentage terms, do people in fact turn it around?
When I think about people who I put on performance plans, I'd probably say about 20 to 25% will actually turn it around and get the kick in the butt and get motivated. And the other 75%, just don't have the right skills. They could have been a mishire, or they have the things that I can't teach. I can't teach someone to be driven, to be curious, to be really well spoken. So that would be an example of a mishire that somehow kind of slipped through the cracks. To prevent that from happening in an early stage company, I highly recommend that. I know, Adam, you do this at Hireology, that me as the co-founder, I interview every single person that we hire to make sure that those mishires don't happen consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. That pays big dividends, and in fact, paid big dividends again today, not an hour ago, I have to tell you. So, absolutely concur with that. Is there a particular book or source of content that has been influential in your approach to hiring?
Specifically around hiring, I can't say there's been one book that really influenced me. I mean, there's the book Who by Jeff Smart, which in the early days really helped me understand what a scorecard was and how a scorecard should be in existence for every job function. I think that is a good book. As far as like scaling a company, Aaron Ross has written some great books, Predictable Revenue or Impossible to Inevitable is the one I'm reading right now. That really gives you the blueprint for how to scale a company at a rapid pace. And then I guess a final book would probably be Traction by Gino Wickman has had a big impact on my companies.
Yeah, you and many of our guests have reported that book to be profoundly impactful to them. And, I'm certainly counted among them. So let's talk as we close out here, a couple of big picture questions for you. What do you think is the greatest lesson you've learned about doing this in the people side of the business?
Well, the greatest lesson I've learned, first of all, is that I don't think there's such thing as work-life balance. There's work-life integration. And once I understood that, that was important for me personally as an entrepreneur, because your success at home carries over to your success at work and vice versa. But with my employees on the people side of it is really understanding what makes them tick. When they look out and they're 65 years old and retiring, what would success have looked like in their career? And how can the job at my company been the best job for them to have success? So I want them to really own the job and not rent the job. And we have a lot of millennials who probably in most companies would rent the job. They work there for, call it 2 or 3 years and then move on to the next opportunity. And here I really encourage my employees to own the job and hopefully be here for as long as possible.
And as you sit in the seat today looking out, what do you think is something that you could or should improve upon as it pertains to talent management at UrbanBound?
Probably our performance reviews. I think we do a really good job of getting people in the door and we give constant feedback. That's one of the processes I constantly look at because we do them annually. And I do think employees need feedback probably monthly or quarterly. And that's something that I would like to change in the very near future.
All right. So closing question here, Mr. Ellman, if you were to come back on this show a year from now and report to us on whether or not you were able to successfully tackle the single biggest people-related issue or opportunity that you have in front of you, what will you be telling us happened?
The biggest opportunity for me on the people side is helping people be promoted, helping them stretch and try new things within the framework of our business. And that is something that we're constantly striving to do, and that's something we can definitely measure success by.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the final word. You've been learning from Jeff Ellman, co-founder of UrbanBound and many other companies, including Hireology. Jeff, thank you so much for being with us on the program today. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Best Team Wins podcast, where we feature entrepreneurs and business leaders whose exceptional approach to the people side of their business has led to incredible results. My name is Adam Robinson, author of the book, The Best Team Wins, which you can find online at www.thebestteamwins.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Best Team Wins podcast with Adam Robinson. You can find out more information about Adam and his book, The Best Team Wins, Building Your Business Through Predictive Hiring, at thebestteamwins.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.